Boom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is what every entrepreneur gets wrong about business law. And if you want to learn how to not make those mistakes, you're going to want to tune in. Let's get this one started. Here we go.
Shut up and sit down.
Look, a business can give you everything you want in life. Prestige, wealth, freedom. It can also take everything away from you. This show is for those who are willing to take that risk. These are the real life stories of entrepreneurs. But before we start, I have one small favor to ask. Please leave a comment. It can be advice, critiques, tips, feedback, or share this with someone because your engagement is the most valuable and most powerful form of social currency. So thank you, and welcome to another episode of Business Bros. All right, business bros, he's the legal shield behind countless successful businesses, guiding entrepreneurs through the legal minefields they never even saw coming. From startup structure to contact clarity, he's the business attorney every entrepreneur needs in their corner. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Matthew Fornaro. And just like that, Matt, we can get this party started.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I think I saw my son in that party clip.
I love that. All right, Matt. Let's make sure that your kid doesn't get into any lawsuits here. But let's talk about a little bit about you and how you got into this business law thing. Give me a little bit of background.
Sure. So I, grew up liking like the law and legal stuff. I watched like the People's Court and stuff like that. So I always kind of knew I wanted to go to law school. So I went through undergrad and was a political science major so the only thing I was fit to do is either go into politics or law school. So I went to law school. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do in law school. I did intellectual property stuff. I got an IP certificate, which I've actually done in my career throughout, which is pretty good. But when I came out, I worked for a small boutique firm, and then I worked for two AmLaw 200 law firms, which are big law firms. And I focused on commercial litigation, business litigation, helping large businesses, banks, insurance companies, things like that. And I did that till about 2014, right around 2015. And I had the opportunity to go to an even bigger law firm and get more money and do what I was doing. But I kind of had a fork in the road experience / moment where I was like, is this what I'm going to be doing my whole life, is just working at big firms, doing these kind of cases and kind of plateauing and then looking to move on after every few years, or do some kind of equity buy-in to be a partner or something like that. So I decided I wanted to start my own law firm, and this is almost 11 years ago. And I decided that I wanted to focus on kind of a little bit what I was doing as far as the commercial litigation, the business litigation and stuff. But I wanted to focus on helping small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups, because I didn't think they were really served by big law firms, particularly in metropolitan markets. And the lawyers that are, the local lawyers out in the suburbs, that's not really their thing. So I wanted to kind of bring that out to the, suburbs, the urban population centers, which is what I did. And that's what I've been doing for 11 years now, is focusing on helping small businesses, entrepreneurs and startups with their legal issues, whether it's litigation or transactional. And that's kind of how I am. That's how I got here.
Yeah, I think a lot of small businesses, they want legal help. They want to make sure they do things correctly. But at the beginning phases, money is tight and legal help can be expensive. So you kind of got to weigh in, do I pay the rent this month? Do I pay the attorney this month? It's kind of one of those real hard questions you got to ask yourself, especially early on in the entrepreneurial state. However, I want to also make sure that people don't make certain mistakes. You do need to have legal representation in certain areas. So what are the top 3 legal mistakes you see business owners make, especially when they're getting started?
Sure. So, the mindset of, the entrepreneur or the business owner is that they're really excited and they want to get into business as soon as possible. And which I don't blame them. I mean, obviously, that's their goal. They want to do it. But in doing that, they kind of just jump right in and don't plan properly, and they can get themselves into situations where they're going to get into trouble down the road. So as part of that mantra of, you were just saying, like, do I pay rent or do I do whatever? Well, as part of your, business plan that you should have going forward, you should always factor into your business having access to professionals who will help your business and help different aspects of your business that aren't necessarily the business part, but are like the compliance regulatory part. And that actually helps you focus on your business. So, like, for instance, you should have a business law attorney, you should have an accountant, you should have a commercial banker, you should have like depending on what you're doing or whatever, like a web SEO company, but like an actual real relationship, not just be, one of their many numbers. So with that in mind, I would say the number one mistake is that businesses just jump into business and they don't have a written business plan. And that's essential for any business. You want to have a written business plan, which goes over like the who, when, what, why, where, and how of your business, what your business is going to be about, how you're going to function, what kind of business organization you're going to be, who's going to be in it, how you're going to make money, how you're going to spend money, how you're going to add people, how you're going to subtract people, how you're going to hire people, how you're going to fire people. It's all in that document. And it's not just for your own benefit, but if you're going around and you need to get a loan or you need to get a commercial lease or whatever, a lot of those people are going to be wanting to see your written business plan, particularly if you're unproven. So a lot of people just skip that step and jump into business. The next thing that they skip jumping into business is kind of a follow-up to the written business plan. They don't have written governing documents. So like, I'm in Florida. You go on our Secretary of State website, which is sunbiz.org. And within 5 minutes, you just click on a few buttons, enter some stuff, and you have a business. And it's literally the bare minimum to get into business. And people think that that's it. I'm in business. I don't need to do anything else. Well, that's actually wrong, because if you're an LLC, you need to have an operating agreement. And if you're a corporation, you need to have articles of incorporation and bylaws. So a lot of people skip that step, just think that they went online, they're registered, and they're good to go. And just like the written business plan, you're going to run into issues going forward. If you don't have the written governing documents, you're really going to have issues going forward, because if your business is unsuccessful or if it's successful, you're going to need those documents to say, just like how in theory your business plan says, how you're going to add people, subtract people, do whatever. The agreements, the operating agreement, the bylaws, the articles of incorporation actually say specifically and are legally binding as to how you're going to do all that stuff. So if that's missing, you have to go to the fallback, which is, what does the law say? And you're not going to like the answers. So that's probably the second biggest thing that people miss out on. And then the third kind of goes back to what I said before we began or got into this segment, is they don't have professionals as part of their team to help them at the onset, and they're necessary. They're not a luxury. So you have to have, like I said, the accountant, the banker, the business law attorney. They need to be part of your team. They need to be part of your budget. They need to be part of your plan. They need to be part of your mindset, because you don't need to go it alone. The reason why people like me exist is to help, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and startups with their issues. I deal with the legal issues. You deal with the business. Your accountant deals with the financial issues and the tax issues. You deal with the business. The banker deals with the money issues, getting you, loans, setting up your payment processing, things like that. You focus on the business. And a lot of people just skip over that and try to do it themselves. And that's where they run into issues. And those would probably be your three classic startup mistakes that businesses make.
Those are definitely big issues, right? You start a business, don't really have a plan in place. You start a business, you don't really have any structure in place. You start a business, and you don't even have the right team members in place, and you're trying to do it all yourself. Those are definitely open doors for mistakes. Let's face it, as an entrepreneur, you're going to make mistakes either way. And I understand, having a business plan, but not all plans go to the way they're working, but they give you at least a path that you're going along the way. Now, the biggest issue I think for startups is always revenue, right? I mean, I got started, I have the money coming in, like we said earlier. Which one do we do first? So, at what stage should an entrepreneur hire a business attorney? I mean, ideally, we'd like them at the beginning and map it all out and do all the structure, but in reality, it doesn't always plan out that way. So, in reality, like, should I hire an attorney like in phases? Should I have them on retainer? Like, what stage should I, as an entrepreneur, bring an attorney on, and in what capacity and phases?
Sure. So ideally, you would want your attorney on board before you even start your business, so that way everything gets built from the ground up correctly and there aren't any issues. But obviously, I understand if you have to prioritize money or whatever. I mean, getting revenue or getting a commercial space or getting like a website or whatever, obviously that's probably going to be higher on your list than getting an attorney. So what I would say is get the attorney on board as soon as possible, get the accountant on board as soon as possible, get the banker on board as soon as possible. It's not mandatory to have them before you start up or right at your startup, but it sure helps. And you're gonna proactively do a lot of things to avoid a lot of issues later on that are going to be costly, that you're definitely going to need an attorney to help you fix. So, I mean, the mindset needs to be that they have to be around as soon as possible. And if you can't bring them in on the beginning, bring them in on the startup stage where you're actually picking your business organization and you're going to have your governing documents. Because you pick the wrong business organization, you're going to have major problems, particularly not just from a legal aspect, from the accounting aspect. The accounting aspect is probably more important than the legal aspect, because if you screw up with the numbers, it's very hard to fix going forward, and you're probably going to pay a lot more taxes than you want. If you can't bring on an attorney at that point, obviously bring them on at some point in the life of your business, because you're going to hire people, you're going to fire people, you're going to borrow money, you're going to rent a commercial space, you're going to have an online presence, and those are all interactions with other people or other businesses that should be governed by contracts. And you're going to want to have a business law attorney to review your incoming contracts and to draft your outgoing contracts. And again, not a luxury, a necessity, because if you're doing it by yourself, you don't know what's right and you don't know what's wrong. Obviously you have the best intentions in mind and you're not going to try to intentionally screw things up. But if you do, the consequences are going to be a lot more dire and a lot more costly going forward than if you had the attorney to begin with to prevent those issues.
Oftentimes, entrepreneurs don't think about stuff like that, mainly because they're so excited to get started. Maybe they have a particular skill set that they're good at. They're done being at their 9 to 5. They're like, I can do this better on my own. They go off and start doing the thing, which ultimately maybe they're okay at it. Maybe they're acquiring customers. Maybe they're not. But the issue with just going out and doing it is you end up being a sole proprietor and you leave yourself open to so many different risks factors out there. So often they get an entrepreneur gets the advice of, open an LLC, open an S Corp, open a C Corp. What's the difference between the three, and how do you help clients kind of decide between the entities? And then most importantly, of course, why an entity versus just saying a sole prop?
Sure. So again, this is something where I often defer. Well, I definitely work with, but I also defer to the client's accountant regarding money issues, because you can set up a business organization a lot of different ways from a legal standpoint, and they'll function from a legal standpoint. But from a tax standpoint, from an income standpoint, if you pick the wrong organization and it doesn't match up with your spouse's income or, your spouse's job, or, if you have some kind of trust or something like that, you're going to get killed on taxes. So the main thing before you even start your business organization is if you can't consult with an attorney, you have to consult with an accountant, because the accountant's the most important thing money wise. So the difference among all the business organizations is, they're not super different, like they're totally night and day. They're just slightly different. The only thing that's different is the sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorship is you doing business as you. So there's no third party. There's no artificial, like organization or anything. It's you. So you're liable for all the taxes. You're liable for all the expenses. You're liable for all the debts. You're liable for all the issues that arise. You're liable for all the lawsuits. You're liable for defaulting on your rent. You're liable for everything. So not really advisable to be a sole proprietorship unless you've got something going on very specific, and that would be something that you would have to speak with the attorney and the accountant about. So generally you don't want to be a sole proprietorship, but again, exceptions. So then with the three primary small business organizations, there's the S Corp, the C Corp, and the LLC. And they operate somewhat similarly, but a little bit different. So the corporation is a legal entity where it creates a legal fiction or a legal person that then is distinct from you as a person. It's its own entity. So if you start a corporation, it's its own entity. It's not you. And the corporation is supposed to have bylaws, and it's supposed to have articles of incorporation. It's supposed to have shareholders, and it's supposed to run with corporate formalities depending on which state you're in, because it goes state by state. It's not federal. It's a state thing. So, but most states are pretty much all the same. You have to run your corporation with formalities. You have to have meetings. You have to have minutes. You have to, report income. You have to report losses. You have to do various things, and it depends all on the state. So, great. My business is a corporation. It's been great for me. A lot of businesses are corporations. They're great for them depending on what the business is. And then there's two kinds of corporations. There's the C Corp and the S Corp. This is a federal distinction, despite the fact that corporations are state entities. It's just just a tax distinction. So the C Corp just means it's a corporation that's taxed as a corporation. You as an individual get taxed as an individual. There's a lot of interplay between the two. An S corporation means that your corporation and you are taxed all as one thing. So it's a lot more advantageous if you're like a one-man band or a small entity or whatever, because all your tax goes through one thing, and you can write off a bunch of stuff for tax purposes. You can, pay yourself an income, but the business still makes an income. There's a lot of advantages to it, and that's more like an accounting issue versus a legal issue. Legally, it shields you from personal liability versus the sole proprietorship or doing the things by yourself. And, it's great for a lot of businesses. A lot of other businesses like the LLC is very similar to the corporation. It's a limited liability company. It's all totally state driven. Each state has its different kind of LLC, and you can treat an LLC like the taxation of an S Corp if you want. You can elect that where it's all one thing that goes through, or the LLC can be taxed by itself. The LLC, you have an operating agreement, and instead of stock like in a corporation, you have membership certificates where there's members of your LLC as opposed to shareholders. And again, just like a corporation, it's supposed to be run with formalities, just have meetings, minutes, report your taxes, things like that. It's just a slightly different vehicle that some people like more, and a lot of accountants like more than a corporation for certain tax advantages and liability purposes. A lot of people who hold other assets like real estate or other companies, or people who buy exotic cars, for instance, like to title them in LLCs for the benefits that the LLCs present. But fundamentally, if it's black and white, the LLC and the corporation are kind of shades of gray of difference. They're not night and day different. But that's kind of the overview of the different business organizations. And again, most small businesses are either corporations, and if they're corporations, many are S corporations. And if not, they're LLCs. And again, the way you pick what's best for you is totally subjective. You work out with your attorney and you work out with your accountant what works best for you financially, and then that's what you go with.
It's a great explanation. So we use an entity to protect us from liability. They're state, they're issued by the state, but kind of direct the tax treatment based on which election we make for either the C corp or the LLC. We can be treated as for tax purposes as an S corp. I mean, that's really cool that we even have that options. Now, you mentioned members, you mentioned stockholders. As businesses tend to grow, they always are looking for funding or looking for ways to grow, in which case you start looking for investors or partners that you work with. What advice do you give to business owners dealing with partners or investors when it comes to setting up agreements or preparing to take on partnerships or investors?
Sure. So the first thing would be make sure that you have provisions in your governing documents for your business organization that talk about that. So you're not just kind of blindly being like, I want to add, Joe or Chris, here's the terms I came up with, whatever. Just make something up arbitrary that's totally not covered. You want to make sure it's in your governing documents and everything. And then obviously, once you have that, maybe you want to change the terms or do whatever. You want to make sure every single thing you do is in writing and is not just, we spoke on the phone and here's the deal we're going to do. Or, we traded emails, even though technically that's in writing. You don't want to do that. You want everything to be in a solidified contract that hopefully your business law attorney drafts and, you go back and forth to review, you revise it. Don't do it by yourself because you're probably going to run into major problems, particularly if something happens and the deal falls apart. So you want to make sure that when you're bringing on people or you're bringing on capital, it comports with your governing documents. And then in addition to that, you want to make sure you have very specific contracts that talk about the exact terms of how someone's coming in, what they're bringing in, the terms of what they're bringing in, what kind of ownership interest or equity interest they're going to get in the business, and make sure it's all covered in writing. It's all understood by all parties. It's all mutually agreed upon. It's all signed. It's all fully executed. It's all done in formal terms. It's not informally done. And, that's essentially how you do it.
That's a great way to think about it. Let me ask you about AI, because taking care of your partnerships and that's absolutely vitally important. But we're starting to see this whole new world, especially with AI on social media, where images, likeness, trademarks, all these things are kind of being infringed on in a weird kind of way with AI. As you work with clients, what are some of the legal challenges that maybe you're seeing as online businesses boom, as social media continues to grow, and with the insertion of AI?
Sure. So AI obviously is probably the biggest change that's coming to business maybe ever. All right. And I know that's a bold statement, but it's true because it's permeating everything. I mean, I know in my business, in my actual practice of law, I responsibly and ethically use AI, and it's been, a godsend for me. It's been a force multiplier. It makes things much quicker, much more reliable. But obviously, I am in control. I have to take command of the situation. I take full responsibility for the AI. A lot of people just use AI and just throw stuff out there, and they get in big trouble because it's, hallucinated. It's not verified. It's made up, whatever. I use AI in my actual business practice and my business development, doing, like you were talking about, all SEO, social media, things like that, whatever. And, a lot of businesses are doing that too. And a lot of businesses are bringing AI into other stuff where, I can tell you a lot of clients I deal with, when we communicate back and forth, they throw in there like, here's some stuff I looked up on AI that I want to go over, whatever. And it's like, okay, they're getting advice from me and from ChatGPT or whatever. And then I have to kind of reconcile, be like, okay, that's great in theory, but here's the actual real practice and stuff. So a lot of businesses are kind of throwing around their own AI research in different areas where they deal with other businesses or professionals. Or, I was speaking with a accountant last week, and she was telling me she has the same thing with her clients, where they send her like their AI research regarding tax issues versus, people send me the issues with the legal issues. So again, the reason why all the professionals exist is to help you. The AI is great. The AI gets you information and stuff. But again, you don't know what's right and you don't know what's wrong. The professionals should know what's right and what's wrong. And that's why you should defer to them. I'm always open and welcome, conversations with my clients. If they want to send me materials, I'll review it or whatever. But obviously I take the AI with a grain of salt and make sure I have to verify and review it. Regarding like the use of social media and like the intellectual property aspects of infringement and stuff, it's all up in the air. The whole concept of like intellectual property law for all time has been like based on, for lack of a better term, a human creator. So now that it's technology that's creating the stuff, it's all in an uproar because it's like, well, a person can own things or a company can own things because it's the company, like I talked about, is like a fictional person. But like, how does technology own things? Like, technology is not supposed to be able to create other technology. Who owns it? Is it the person who owns the technology? Is it the person whose stuff was put into the technology and then changed and spit out the other side? Is it the person who actually input the data? So it's all up in the air. It's all, the law is very slow to catch up to a lot of AI stuff. So it's a lot of up in the air kind of stuff or whatever. I mean, as a rule of thumb, you shouldn't be using like other people's intellectual property on your social media or on your, whatever you're doing with AI, your SEO optimization or stuff like that, because sooner or later you're going to run into problems. You're going to run into trouble because you're going to be infringing someone's copyright, someone's trademark, someone's patent, someone's trade secret. So just be very cautious because, again, it's all up in the air, but there's still like base legal concepts that are still like, if you take a trademark and just because the AI put it on your website and not you, ultimately someone's going to come looking for you and say that you violated their trademark, and it's going to be looking for money and liability from you. So same thing with copyright, same thing with patent stuff. So you always got to make sure, just like how in the past you always had to be in control of what goes out there and review what goes out there. Just because AI is doing it doesn't mean you don't have the same obligations. You probably have more obligations because the AI is so creative and so whatever, able to do its own thing, that you have to be even more vigilant on looking at what it creates so that you don't get into trouble.
It's crazy how much of a shortcut it's allowed us to have. It saves us a lot of time, gives us a lot of information. But like you said, this is why you have the professionals in place to verify a lot of that stuff. Speaking of shortcuts, and we'll kind of end on this note. I'll give you time for the plug here at the end too. So help me answer this question, and then also the secondary. So first, why is it dangerous for business owners to rely on the shortcuts, the templates, the Google Docs for their legal documentation? And then, of course, if people want to reach out and find out more about how they can get help with you, how can they do that?
Sure. So again, it goes back to a little bit of what I was talking about. Like, the internet, AI, whatever you want to call it now, cyber, go back to a 90s term, cyberspace, whatever. Okay. The information is all out there, and the right answer is probably out there too. And I guarantee the wrong answer is out there too. You don't know what the difference is. So the problem is when you look at these templates and you look at these, like on all these different websites or whatever, or you have AI generated or something, or even an old-fashioned Google search or whatever. The issue is that you don't know what's right and what's wrong. It could be fine or it could be a disaster. And I can tell you a really quick example. I had a client who, before he came to me, had a dog training business, okay, really successful dog training business. And he had all his dog trainers sign employment contracts, but he got these employment contracts off the internet. And the issue is that, I'm in Florida, Florida law applies to Florida employees. This dude got a template off the internet, and it said that Wisconsin law applies and that any disputes had to be resolved in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin employment law applies. So lo and behold, he had an issue with one of his employees who went out on their own and started a business up against his. And he came to me and he's like, well, what are we going to do? I'll be like, well, you got a problem. You have a Wisconsin contract and we're in Florida. And then, doing some brief Wisconsin research, Florida is a very pro-business state, and not like anti-employment, but much more pro-business over employee side. Wisconsin, exact opposite. Huge employee side, low business side. So the guy totally flipped his rights. And, luckily we settled that case, but it would have been a disaster if we had to go forward. And that's just an example of why you can't believe everything you find online, because that agreement may have been final for Wisconsin, but we're in Florida, and he didn't know the difference between that. And that's the issue, is that as the average entrepreneur or business person, you may not know the difference, and you may be setting yourself up for major problems in the future.
Love it, man. Love it, Matt. Man, ladies and gentlemen, look, at the end of the day, when you start your business, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to have some hiccups. Even if you do things right, like Matt was just explaining, you have your employees set up, you did your things right because you had a contract in place. But unless you're having that human come in and check what's going on, you might be making mistakes you don't even know are out there. Those are what you want to protect yourself from. And I literally hit him with all kinds of different questions in all kinds of different areas. And you got to hear his answers on this episode. If you're looking for help for someone who's already doing what you need to do, is helping clients achieve the protection, structure their businesses in the way that will protect them in the long run so that you can focus your attention on building your business, which is what you want to do. Make sure you go to his website. Scrolling across the bottom, it's his last name, Fornarolegal.com. Matt, before we head out, any final thoughts, and what are people going to find when they go over to your website?
Sure. So, just like I said, you're going into business, A, believe in yourself, have the right mindset, but B, remember people are out there to help you. So go seek the help, whether it's from professionals, from another business owner that you can get advice from or war stories from or whatever, then make sure you're prepared and you do everything right. You can, the best way to get a hold of me, go on FornaroLegal.com. It's got all my social media, my email, my phone number. My website is full of videos, podcasts, white papers, blog entries, all kinds of stuff that'll help you as a business owner. There's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of questions that you have, particularly for Florida people. The answers are on my website. And if you can't find the answers on my website, give me a call or email me.
Boom. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Look, every phase of life is different, just like every phase of business is different. What you're doing when you first get started is not going to be the same thing you're doing to get to that next level. And ultimately, in order for you to go from A to B and B to C, you're going to start to need to partner with people who can help you get there. Again, Matt and his team are there to help structure that. Maybe it's not the full legal team you go right up front, but if you start with them, they can guide you in the right direction. Fornarolegal.com. Fornarolegal.com is the website. Matt, thank you very much for being on the program today. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace. And we're out. It's over. Go home. Is your business in need of marketing? Try starting a podcast, but not just any podcast. Podcast like a pro. We can show you how to take your business from being invisible to becoming a brand people trust. Go to www.businessbros.biz